In this unit, we will learn how to transform our objects. In order to be able to transform your object, you'll firstly need to select it to define which part of your graphic you want to edit. You can select single or multiple objects as well as specific points. In this unit, we will also learn how to move, rotate, and scale our objects freely or specifically. You will see how to clone or duplicate objects as well as how to adjust their corners. Let me show you. Let's get started learning the most basic tool in Illustrator, which is our black arrow. It's the first tool on our toolbar, and the shortcut for that tool is the letter V. It allows us, just by clicking on any of the objects, to select it and be able to transform it. The other thing that you can do is click on it and drag it to just move it around. You don't have to always select each of the objects separately. With a Shift key hold down, you can click on multiple objects, select them, and then adjust them, transform them, move them, or whatever you actually want to do with them. Another way is to click and drag your click to select multiple objects. Once I release it, everything that is within this little dashed rectangle is gonna get selected. And now I can just move the shapes around and repositioning them however I like. Now, what happens if you actually don't want to select the full shape but just parts of it? You will need to firstly click and select the direct selection tool, or else we are calling it the white arrow, and the shortcut is letter A in your keyboard. It allows you to select your objects just by clicking the center of them and then move them around, or select specific anchor points and move them and adjust them, or even their handles and redefine your shapes. If I want to select multiple anchor points, all I need to do is hold the Shift key down to click on few different anchor points to select them. With the Shift key down, also you can click on points that you already selected to remove them from your selection. And then you can redefine it just by moving them around. Moreover, you can click and drag your click and create again this dashed rectangle, which once you release your click, it's going to create the selection. This selection can again be used in order to adjust your shape by moving your anchor points around. So what happens now if you have a bit more complicated composition where you want to select multiple objects that have almost the same colors? Instead of having to click on each of them one by one, holding the Shift key down, what you can do is use the magic wand tool. It's just underneath the selection tools, and it allows you to select objects that they have similar characteristics. And by similar, what I mean is if you double click on your tool, you can define on what kind of characteristics you want your selection to be sensitive at. Let's start with the fill color. If the tolerance, so the sensitivity, is just 20, if I'm gonna click on this cream of white color, it's gonna select both that color and the white one. If I'm gonna reduce it even lower to just 5 and click again on it, you will see that my selection is even more sensitive. So it's just gonna select the object that has the specific color. You can also make the magic wand tool sensitive to things such as like the stroke color. So if I'm gonna click on this object here, it's gonna select also the red one because they have exactly the same stroke color. And so on, it works with a stroke weight. It selects all 4 shapes since they all have the same stroke weight. And of course, you can also enable multiple points to be sensitive at just by enabling the box next to the different feature. So if I'm gonna click now on this object, it's the only object actually on my artboard that has the same stroke color, stroke weight, and fill color. There is the opacity option and the blending mode. What I usually do is mostly using the fill color and the stroke color whenever it comes to selecting multiple objects quickly. Now we're going to move to the second part, which is about duplicating our shapes. I'm going to switch layer, but don't worry about that too much at the moment. We are going to go through layers in more detail. If you want to duplicate an object such as this circle here, one way is to go to Edit, Copy, and Edit Paste, or the shortcuts Command-C, Command-V, or Control-C, Control-V. Or you can even go Edit, Paste in Place to paste it exactly where the previous one was, just on top of it. Or you can also hold the Alt key down while clicking and dragging your click in order to create a clone of your objects. Once you release your click, your object will be created. And now if you press Command and D or Control D, it's going to create more clones based on the distance of your previous clone from the initial one. Or else you can just right click, transform, and transform again. If I would start with cloning this object in a diagonal way and continue pressing Command D to create some clones, you'll see that it would follow that direction and again the same distance with my original object from the first clone. What you can also do with your objects, except from just moving them around, is to transform them in different ways, such as like scaling them or rotating them. But firstly, let's have a look on how you can reposition your object specifically if you want to. And that's by right-clicking and then transform and then move. And that allows you to define the position in a horizontal way and in a vertical way. So let's say I want to be 100 pixels on a horizontal way and another 100 on a vertical way. And you see where it's positioned. Or else you can say I want it to be 200 pixels away from the original position and 280 degrees angle. You can define the position either from the top part of the panel, so define the horizontal and the vertical position, or with the distance and the angle. Make sure that the preview button is enabled so you can see the repositioning live. You press OK to apply your reposition. As I mentioned before, what you can also do is scale your object. One way is just by hovering over these little squares on the edges of your shape, and you see how your cursor transforms to two arrows instead of the cursor. And that allows you to select them and drag your shape to scale it up or down and so on. Once you release your click, the transformation will be applied. If you hold the Shift key down while transforming your object, it's going to keep the proportions equal. If I'm going to right click and then go to transform and then scale, that allows me to scale my object in a non-uniform way or in a uniform way and make it bigger or smaller and so on. Make sure again preview is on so you can actually see the transformation. The last thing is rotating your object. So if I'm going to click on my object and hover over the corner, you see again that I have these little arrows. And that allowed me to click and drag my click in order to rotate my object around itself. If I hold the Shift key down at the same time while rotating my object, I will rotate it every time 45 degrees. If I right click and go to transform and then rotate, that allows me to rotate my object with an exact angle. Again, if I press OK, the transformation will be applied. Another thing is how to round your corners. So I have these 4 shapes here that I'm going to show you quickly how to make their corners nice and round. You just select your object. If you use your white arrow, you should be able to see these little circles appearing within the corners. If I'm going to click and drag my click, it allows me to make my corners more and more round. Or I can even select with my white arrow one specific corner and transform it by itself. It's interesting how it works on different shapes, such as the star here. I can just define at the same time the inner and the outer corners, or I can just go ahead and select with my Shift key, hold it down, all the inner corners, and select the little circle, drag it, and redefine how the shape looks like. On the rectangle, it works in a similar way, so you can make it nice and curvy, or even in hexagon and any other shape that comes to your mind. I'm just gonna undo the last two and show you also that you can select multiple corners of different objects and make their corners round at the same time. Now, what happens in case that you forgot to make this corner round and you try to make it the same as the others, but you're not really sure where exactly it was? What happens now if you want to round your corner is click on the corner, and you will see here on the properties panel at the top that allows you to define the exact pixels that you want it to be rounded at. And you can click on a corner that's already been round, and you can see the amount that you used, how many pixels round you actually made it. So let's put 100 here, and I can also select the other one and make it exactly the same. If you click on the text where it says corners, it allows you to define more options about them, such as the style of the corner that you want to use and the rounding, so how curvy you actually want it to be. All these transformation options are allowing us to customize our shapes and create any graphic. We are going to explore this further later on in the course, where we are going to put everything into practice. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. In the next unit, we are going to explore how to use the pen tool.